some nasty responses from Charles Blow. Charles Blow is a columnist with the New York Times, one of these Victocrat columnists. I call him Victocrat columnist because he's one of those who sees racism under every rock, who views the world through race-tinted glasses, not unlike people like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and Eric Holder. And rather than have a critique about anything I've said, he says that Larry is just trying to get paid. I guess he works for free for the New York Times. I mean, honestly, you can't deal with what I say and address it without attacking me personally. I mean, it's just this guy writes for the New York Times. I mean, it's like when that professor Henry Louis Gates was confronted by the Cambridge police officer because somebody called 911 because Gates had come back from vacation and forgotten his house key. Until he broke into his own home, and neighbors saw it. She was concerned. She called 911, as you'd like a neighbor to do, and the police show up promptly, as you'd like them to do, and they see this man in this house, and the officer politely asked him to come out and show ID, and rather than do that, Henry Louis Gates said, I'll come out when your mom is out there, or something like that. I mean, these are people that you'd expect to behave in a much more dignified fashion. Instead, they act like street thugs. And this guy, Charles Blow, well, Larry just getting paid, y'all. I mean, really? So you work for free? You donate your check from the New York Times to the charity of your choice, and you live in a cardboard box on Skid Row? Really? How about dealing with what I say? What did I say that's offensive to you? It's not true that a lot of blacks are trained to think like victims. It's not true that the Black Lives Matter movement is built upon a bunch of lies. It's not true that Michael Brown did not have his hands up and did not say don't shoot and was not running away. It turns out he was running toward Officer Darren Wilson, as was indicated by the forensic evidence and by the eyewitnesses, several of whom happened to be black. What did I say that was false? Please tell me. Tell me. I'd like to know. Instead, it's not true that Eric Holder has said that pernicious racism was voter ID, even though the majority of blacks support that. Am I wrong about that? What am I wrong about? Tell me. Tell me. I mean, honestly. The other thing I find fascinating about this, as I said before, blacks are trained to think like victims. And they're also trained to attack like rabid dogs people who disagree. Republicans, Tea Party members, especially black Republicans. A black Republican is the most vile thing in the world. Why? Because I represent the antithesis of what they're saying. They're talking about how racism holds you back. Black Republicans are talking about hard work wins. That's an assault on what these guys believe. That's an assault on what these guys stand for. So I represent a direct threat to the whole worldview of people like Charles Blow, who writes for the New York Times, Eugene Robinson, who writes for the Washington Post, and there's another a black writer who's also a Victocrat writer for one of those newspapers. Do they have any writer who thinks like me? Any of them? No. And so that's one of the reasons people turn to shows like mine to get a different perspective. And rather than say, Larry has a different perspective, I disagree, here's why, Larry's just being paid. In other words, Larry's not saying anything he believes. Larry's just figuring out what he can say in order to, quote, get paid. Does that make any kind of sense at all? It's juvenile. It's the kind of thing you hear from a third grader. I'd like to write Mr. Blow back, but he's blocked me. I haven't blocked him. He's blocked me. Same thing would happen with D.L. Hughley. D.L. Hughley is another Victocrat, the comedian who's made some comment about Herman Cain, and I dared suggest that that was an unfair comment, and then he and I got into a Twitter battle. He got his butt kicked, and then he blocked me, which is what you do when you start losing a debate. I wasn't using any profanity. I've blocked people that use F-bombs and S-bombs and things like that.